The silence before the Terran fleet arrived was not peaceful. It was unnatural. Across the Orion Rift, in systems where light years passed without a whisper of war, something ancient stirred in the nerves of alien species. It wasn't a sound they heard. It wasn't a warning beamed through hyperlight. It was in their bones. Fear. Something their ancestors hadn't felt since before the stars had maps and names. Something human. On the bridge of the Vrex Dominion's prime flagship, High Admiral Terek watched the strange signal dance across the hologrid. Static. Interference. Something was coming through the edge of the void, but the instruments refused to label it. It was like a fleet. But wrong. Faster than it should have been. Denser than expected. No transponder codes. No diplomatic tags. Just raw energy signatures. Pushing at the border of known space like a tidal wave with no sound. He leaned forward, his four jointed fingers twitching. Report! His first officer, a trembling Krelk named Graal, turned with wide yellow eyes. We're reading a formation of... He stopped, swallowed. Hundreds, possibly thousands. They're coming through the rupture line. Terek's gills flared in disbelief. That region was a known dead zone. No warp routes, no colonies. No civilization had survived trying to pass through it. It was filled with black star husks, broken moons, magnetic storms that tore ships apart. Nothing came through there. Nothing should. Species? Graal shook his head. No ID, sir. But... He paused. Some of the shapes match archive data. Very old data. Terran warcraft. The bridge fell silent. Even the background hum of the neural cortex link dimmed. Terek whispered the word like a curse. Humans. Centuries ago, humanity had broken itself trying to become a galactic power. They'd refused to assimilate, refused to kneel to the Federation's demands, refused to surrender their sovereignty. The Council had declared them a threat to galactic peace. And so the Great Purge began. Earth had burned, or so they thought. Terran colonies had vanished from scans. Some said they'd turned on themselves. Others said they'd been wiped out by their own AI. The galaxy moved on. Until now. Far across the starfield, through a fleet of telescopic eyes and deep space drones, the Terran armada emerged. They didn't crawl through space, they punched through it. Their ships were sharp, brutalist, angular, black steel built without aesthetics. Massive dreadnoughts with no visible insignias. Just rows of cold white lights running like eyes across their hulls. They moved in formation, silent and disciplined, like a pack of predators that didn't need to show teeth to prove they could kill. No hails, no warning. Just presence. A comms officer broke the silence. Sir, they are broadcasting something. One message, looping, Terek barked. Play it. A voice crackled through the chamber. Male, human, cold as a tomb. This is the Terran fleet. We have returned. You burned our world. You erased our people. Now, the debt is due. No title. No name. Just that. Terek felt something he hadn't felt in his 4 decades of command. Panic. Contact the Council. Evacuate non-military vessels. Get me every warship within 12 sectors, now. But it was already too late. The Terran ships began to fan out, moving with mathematical precision. Taking formation in a wedge across the star line. And in the center of the armada, surrounded by titanic capital ships that pulsed with strange gravitational fields, floated a behemoth, the Resolute. The sensors couldn't read its mass. It distorted reality around it. Its engines didn't burn, they absorbed. Its surface bristled with what looked like cannons the size of cities. It was not a battleship. It was a statement. A god's middle finger aimed at the galaxy. Inside the bridge of the Resolute, a man stood alone at the command deck. tall, scarred, wrapped in matte black armor that looked less like metal and more like something alive. His eyes glowed faintly with neural links. He didn't speak. He watched. His name was Commander Redden, and he hadn't forgotten. They'd left Earth in ashes. They had hunted his bloodline across sectors. They had erased Terran history from the galactic archives, but they'd made one mistake. They didn't finish the job. And now, silence swept the stars as the galaxy trembled, not because humans came back weak and broken, but because they came back angry. The void outside the viewport stretched endlessly, quiet, cold, and black, but for Commander Redden, it felt like standing at the edge of a graveyard filled with ghosts no one dared name. He stared into that darkness with eyes that no longer held warmth. Not because he didn't feel, he felt everything, but because the rage inside him had buried all the light a long time ago. Behind him, the bridge of the Resolute buzzed with silent precision. No shouting, no chaos. His crew didn't panic. They were Terran-born, descendants of survivors, warriors raised on forgotten moons, shattered habitats, and deep void stations, each of them raised with one truth carved into their bones. Humanity remembers. Humanity repays. A quiet voice broke the stillness. Target lock confirmed on Dominion fleet. Orders? He turned slightly, glancing at Lieutenant Kren, a lean man with burn scars up one side of his neck and a mechanical eye that twitched when he was anxious. He wasn't twitching now. No fire, Redden said, voice low but final. Kren looked surprised. Sir, we don't fire until they beg. He could feel the tension ripple across the crew. Not confusion, not fear, just anticipation. They knew what this was. This wasn't just war. This was vengeance. Slow, measured, surgical. Decades ago, the galaxy had watched Earth burn. The Terran Confederacy had refused to fall in line with the Galactic Accord, a bloated council of soft empires, bureaucrats, and polished generals who lived in peace because someone else bled for them. Humanity had refused to disarm. They'd refused to turn their AI into labor bots. They'd refused to surrender their identity. So the galaxy decided to erase them. No formal war, no declaration, just coordinated annihilation. Terran colonies were hit simultaneously, orbital strikes on Mars, bioweapons on Europa, silent assassinations on trade ships. Earth itself was bombarded until the oceans boiled and the crust split open. The last Terran transmission had been a scream. But the galaxy had underestimated the one thing no sensor could track: human stubbornness. A few warships, deep in black space, had gone dark before the purge. A few commanders had refused to answer distress calls, knowing it was a trap. They didn't rush in. They didn't try to save Earth. They went underground. And from that silence grew something the galaxy thought was extinct. Now, the Vrex Dominion's prime fleet floated in a defensive wedge, weapons primed, shields raised, thousands of lives ready to die. But no one moved. Tarek stood on his bridge, staring at the data feed. They're just sitting there, he said, voice dry. They have the advantage. Why don't they attack? His first officer answered quietly. They're waiting for us to panic. The Terran ships didn't need to move. They made the stars feel smaller just by being there. Every alien warship pilot had read about humans in Academy history, always brushed off as a primitive footnote. But now, they looked out their viewports and saw something terrifying. Humanity hadn't evolved into peace. They had refined their hunger for war. Back aboard the Resolute, Redden sat alone in his private chamber, bare metal walls, no personal trinkets, no softness, just old weapons mounted on the wall and a tattered Terran flag sealed behind reinforced glass. He stared at it, fingers steepled. He could still hear his father's voice. The man who had dragged him as a boy through the wreckage of the lunar evacuation, hands bloody, lungs burning from smoke. We don't forget, we don't forgive, we build, and we come back. His father had died years later, eaten alive by radiation on a failed colony. No burial, just a name carved into a steel plate bolted to a wrecked mining rig. And now here he was, leading the greatest fleet humanity had ever built, not for conquest, not for expansion, but for one thing only: revenge. A chime interrupted his thoughts. Incoming call. Visual feed. From the Dominion. Redden stood, straightened his uniform. Put it through. The screen flickered, revealing the face of Admiral Terran, scaled skin, golden eyes, teeth too many for a peaceful species. Terran forced a calm expression. Commander, I did not expect you to reach out. I didn't. You did, Redden said flatly. Terran blinked. Very well. Then I ask, why are you here? The war is ancient history. That conflict ended before most of us were born. Redden didn't blink. It didn't end, it was paused, and we didn't forget. The alien swallowed. We believed you extinct. I know, Redden said, stepping closer to the screen. That was your first mistake. Terran cleared his throat, trying to remain diplomatic. This galaxy has changed. There are accords now, rules. If you strike... Redden interrupted him. Let me make this clear. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to be welcomed back. We're not here to reclaim territory. Terran's jaw clenched. Then why? Redden's voice dropped, cold and sharp. We're here to make sure every species that had a hand in Earth's destruction feels what we felt. Piece by piece, system by system, until your children wake up screaming with memories that aren't even theirs. Terran paused. You'll spark a war against the entire council. No, Redden said with a cruel smile. We'll finish one. In the hours that followed, the Dominion fleet sent out dozens of distress calls. Messages flew through subspace, begging for reinforcements, appealing to allies. Some responded. Others didn't. Many simply said, "You brought this on yourselves." Redden didn't need to fire a single shot yet. The fear alone was spreading like a disease. Trade routes were abandoned, civilian transports rerouted. Border systems began to evacuate in silence. Terror moved faster than missiles. Back in the ship's war room, several commanders stood around a large holomap, each of them handpicked by Redden. These weren't polished military school types. These were killers, veterans of outlaw sectors, rogue exiles, former pirates who'd been brought back into the fold by one thing: a promise of blood. Captain Veras, a broad-shouldered brute with a growl for a voice, spoke first. Dominion fleet's bluffing. They've got numbers, but their command structure is too bloated. One decapitation strike and they scatter. Another commander, lean and silent, just nodded. Redden said, "We won't strike them first. We make them fire." Veras raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I want every camera on every world to see it. I want the galaxy to know that they started it. Again. That they couldn't resist trying to kill humans. Again, and this time, we finish it on our terms. As tension mounted, the Dominion finally cracked. A single corvette, nervous, overeager, or just desperate, launched a warning shot. A plasma burst ripped through space, glancing off the shields of one Terran frigate. No damage, but it was enough. Redden stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the impact report. He nodded once. "Return fire." The first volley was not loud. It didn't scream or flash. It whispered. A thin beam of compressed energy sliced through the void like a scalpel. It struck the corvette dead center. One moment it was a ship. The next, vapor, no explosion, no wreckage, just nothing. Then the real bombardment began. Terran ships moved like sharks through bloodied water. Their railguns fired projectiles too fast for the eye to track. Their AI-driven turrets mapped enemy movement before they moved. Their ECMs shut down communication. Dominion ships fell in silence, one by one. It wasn't a battle, it was a lesson. The lesson was simple. You should have finished us when you had the chance. On the surface of a nearby moon, civilians watched the sky change color. Children asked why the stars were blinking. Fathers stood still, jaws clenched. Old veterans who had fought in the Purge era sat in silence, their eyes wide. They knew that color in the sky. They remembered what it meant. Terran weapons didn't miss. They chose who lived. In less than an hour, the Dominion's prime fleet was gone. No escape pods were spared. No command ship was left intact. The only signal that remained in the system came from a Terran beacon. It pulsed 3 words over and over again. We remember, we return, we reclaim. Back on the Resolute, Redden stood alone in his chamber again, staring at the flag. The first step was done. But this wasn't revenge yet. This was just the warning shot. There were more species to find, more systems that had signed Earth's death warrant, and he would burn them all, one by one, until the last child of the stars learned to fear the word human again. Smoke doesn't rise in space. It spreads like fog. After the Dominion's prime fleet was obliterated, what remained of their flagship drifted in pieces across the void. Scorched hull fragments, melted steel, frozen limbs that drifted slowly through the black. No survivors, no comms. Just silence. But the Resolute didn't wait to celebrate. Redden didn't believe in victory dances. He believed in momentum. He stood at the tactical display table in the central war room, no medals on his chest, no grin on his face, just sharp eyes, set jaw, and an entire Empire's execution list spread across holographic stars. "We're not stopping," he said. "I want 3 fleets moving by end of cycle. Divide targets into tiers." Captain Veras nodded. Top tier, Vrex military centers. Mid-tier, manufacturing colonies and logistical hubs. Bottom tier, worlds that gave them supply lines during the Purge. Redden tapped the table. "Erase the middle tier first." "Not the top?" someone asked. "No," Redden said. "We don't kill their armies yet. We starve them first, collapse their economy, break their support chain, make them watch their strength rot from within, let them scream into the void for help." He turned, pointing at the rotating star chart, "and make sure every world hears those screams." The Terran fleet split into 3. Each arm of humanity's war machine moved like a blade through a ribcage, swift, exact, emotionless. No negotiations, no delays. These weren't invasions. They were reckonings. Across the mid-hail systems, Dominion mining colonies were incinerated before they even realized they'd been marked. Tactical nukes, planet crackers, orbital kinetic rods, no fanfare, no pre-strike warnings. The Terrans didn't demand surrender. They simply removed what was no longer welcome in their galaxy. At Colony Delta 42, a Vrex governor named Paulin tried to transmit a plea for negotiation. His final words were recorded by orbiting probes. "We did what we were told. We didn't choose the Purge. We were just feeding our families." Seconds later, a tungsten rod the size of a tower fell from low orbit, traveling at hypersonic velocity. The colony didn't explode. It ceased to exist. Back aboard the Resolute, Redden watched it all in silence. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He simply turned to his officers. "Where's the next council target?" Lieutenant Kren responded. "Drath Syndicate Outpost. They supplied cyber warfare teams during the Purge. They're protected under current galactic accord. Attacking them would breach—" "Their laws don't apply to us," Redden said. Kren nodded. "Coordinates locked. fleet standing by. In the council chambers of Hatal Prime, the ruling species screamed into overlapping comlinks, arguing, blaming, panicking. These were the same species who had voted for Earth's destruction centuries ago, so smug in their belief that humanity was too young, too primitive, too unstable. Now they begged each other to respond. But no one wanted to be first. Each species feared the same truth, that if they retaliated, the Terrans would come for them next. Ambassadors were thrown out of meetings. Alliances crumbled. Trade networks collapsed overnight. Entire sectors refused to take shipments from Earth-involved governments. Children were pulled from schools. Civilians started stockpiling. Even peaceful cultures began arming colonies. Fear worked better than diplomacy ever had. In a dark corner of council space, there was one man, not human, who understood exactly what was happening. He wasn't a leader or a soldier. He was a historian. Professor Kaylor, an aging scholar from the Vela species, sat alone in his archive vault surrounded by ancient texts and forbidden records. His eyes, grayed and weary, scanned the last Terran transmissions that had been buried by the Council's memory protocols. He whispered to no one. They warned us. They said if they ever came back, they'd bring war the galaxy couldn't comprehend. He leaned forward and opened a file labeled Operation Silence, the classified account of Earth's final hour. What he saw made his stomach turn. Humans hadn't fallen. They'd retreated, burned their own ground, hidden their survivors. The purge had failed. The Council had only destroyed Earth's surface, not the soul that had built it. Meanwhile, Reddin stood on a rocky cliff overlooking a scorched world. This planet had once held a Vrex command station. Now it was black glass. The wind carried the burnt metallic scent of vaporized alloy. Beside him stood a boy, 13 years old, small frame, dark eyes. One of the orphans raised aboard the fleet. "Why did you destroy this one too?" the boy asked. "They helped erase your past," Reddin said. The boy nodded. "So, we destroy their future?" "No," Reddin replied. "We destroy their denial." He knelt, facing the boy. "They want to believe what happened was justified, that we were dangerous, that we had no place in their galaxy." "And we show them they were wrong?" "No," Reddin said, standing. "We show them we never cared about their approval. We show them we don't ask to exist. We take that right with blood." 3 weeks into the Terran campaign, over 43 alien systems had been silenced. Not conquered, not occupied, silenced. And yet, not a single human had stepped foot on those worlds. They didn't need to. They weren't interested in flags or glory, only proof. Proof that the debt was real. Proof that history remembers. But not all species cowered. A few old empires began to stir. One in particular, the Dalsai Collective, ancient manipulators, known for pulling strings behind council doors, sent a message directly to Reddin's fleet. It was brief. "You are outnumbered, outarmed, outmatched. You will be isolated. You will run out of fuel, out of allies, out of time." Reddin stared at the message, then recorded a reply. "We ran out of patience centuries ago. And as for allies, we don't need any." He paused. "We don't conquer worlds. We end bloodlines." Then he deleted the message. No need to wait for their reply. In secret, the Dalsai began preparations for a counterstrike. They built a fleet designed to move through stealth routes, targeting key Terran vessels, aiming to assassinate Reddin to cut the Serpent's head. But Terran intelligence had evolved far beyond what they expected. Before the Dalsai fleet could even leave their hidden base, their navigation AI was corrupted. Coordinates flipped. Their stealth engines overheated. Their own ships turned on them. In one of the Terran fleet's most advanced projects, Echo Virus, human programmers had learned how to teach enemy ships to fear. and when the Dalsai admiral tried to manually override his vessel, the ship exploded from the inside out. Reddin received the detonation logs minutes later. He didn't say a word. He just marked the next name on the list. By the end of the 4th week, whispers began to replace panic. Across neutral systems, in criminal dens, forgotten stations, and outlaw colonies, people began to talk about the Terrans not as devils, but as correct. "They're not wrong," one pirate was heard saying. "The Council's been corrupt for centuries. Maybe the humans are just finishing what we were too scared to start." That was what Reddin wanted. Not fame, not mercy. He wanted the truth to sound like fear. On the Resolute, deep in the war deck beneath the bridge, rows of cryopods sat in darkness. Each pod held a name. Each name was someone lost during the purge. They weren't dead. They were survivors put into stasis during Earth's fall. The best minds, the last artists, the archivists, the fighters, the farmers. Thousands of Terrans frozen in time, waiting for the galaxy to be ready for them. Reddin walked through the cryobay alone some nights. He read names, he touched glass, and he remembered. He wasn't here to kill everyone. He was here to make space safe for those who deserved to rise again. But not yet. First, he had to finish the list. Desperation makes empires bleed faster than war ever could. The Galactic Council had always presented itself as unified. Dozens of species in harmony, a system of checks, treaties, mutual trade, and military pacts. But the Terran campaign exposed the lie faster than anyone expected. In less than a month, the illusion shattered. Systems stopped answering distress calls. Member worlds refused to deploy ships. Old rivalries that had been buried under polished political speeches rose again. Everyone started looking for someone else to blame. No one wanted to admit it outright. But the truth echoed in every comm channel, every abandoned sector, every trembling military outpost. The humans had broken the galaxy's spine without needing to conquer a single capital. And they were still just getting started. Inside the domed war council on Hatal Prime, chaos reigned. Ambassadors screamed across the chamber, hurling accusations, pounding fists, threatening sanctions. Giant holographic maps showed star systems blinking red, each one marked as silent or destroyed. Whole colonies had gone dark. Infrastructure hubs had been erased from orbit. Not a single transmission made it out before the Terrans struck. Representative Veller of the Thrax Confederacy, one of the oldest and most militant council members, slammed a clawed hand against the steel table. "This is a disgrace. We have fleets 10 times their size. Deploy them! Flatten their warships!" "They move like shadows," barked another. "They jam our sensors, warp faster than our tracking systems can keep up, and strike targets that shouldn't even be accessible. This isn't a war, it's a slaughter." "They don't conquer. They don't take resources or territory. That's not warfare, it's terrorism," one yelled. An older, slower voice broke through from the rear. Counselor Dranis, ancient and pale, spoke only one line. "Then maybe we should have never lit the match." That silenced the room for a beat. Then Veller growled, "So what? We just let them finish what they started? Let them kill every world that signed off on the Purge Accords? That includes us?" A younger diplomat whispered under his breath, "We earned it." Back aboard the Resolute, Reddin was preparing the next wave. He stood before the fleet's AI core, deep in the belly of the flagship. Towering server stacks lined the walls, flickering with blue pulses of light. It wasn't a traditional AI, not like the galaxy had seen before. It didn't carry a voice or a face. It was something else entirely, the archive. It was human memory, rage, strategy, and calculation woven into code. He placed his hand on the biometric reader. The interface lit up and scanned him. "Commander Reddin, access level Harbinger. Request, Next strategic priority. The screen displayed a single word: Oris. Redden narrowed his eyes. That world wasn't military. It wasn't even a logistics hub. It was a media world, the largest neutral broadcast satellite array in the galaxy. Oris didn't fire missiles. It broadcast news, culture, art, and propaganda. It had remained untouched for centuries, until now. The Council's greatest weapon had always been its control over narrative. They didn't need to win wars if they could win minds. When they ordered the destruction of Earth, they sold it as a necessary act, a mercy purge to prevent AI infection, a just strike against rising human aggression. But Oris held the raw data, the uncut footage of Earth's final days, the intercepted communications, the purge commands. If the public saw those files, the galaxy would know who the monsters really were. So Redden would take it, not with nukes or railguns, but with truth. The attack on Oris came without warning, as always. A Terran strike group broke through their orbital defense grid in under 30 minutes. They didn't even fire on the planetary array. Instead, Terran infiltrators, clad in obsidian armor, dropped onto the surface in stealth pods. Inside the main tower of Oris Central Archive, alarms screamed as security drones scrambled. Technicians ran, shouting into comms, trying to call for help. But their signals were jammed. In the control room, an Oris director, pale-skinned, aging, trembling, stood frozen as the door burst open. A man walked in. Tall, Terran, no rank, no insignia, just a voice. "We're not here to kill you." The director flinched. What do you want?" The Terran reached into his belt and placed a hard drive on the console. "Broadcast this, now, across every channel." The director hesitated. "If I do, the Council will—" "You're already dead," the man said. "You just haven't stopped breathing yet." He didn't wait for a response. He walked out. The director looked down at the drive. It was labeled simply, "Earth Truth," unedited across the galaxy. Screens flickered. Billboards on trade planets froze mid-advertisement. Stations in deep space paused their entertainment feeds. Children's holo cartoons turned to static. And then, in one synchronized moment, every major broadcast played the same thing. The Purge, raw, unedited, screams, Earth cities burning, Council fleets opening fire on civilian vessels, AI voices pleading for peace, Council soldiers laughing over comms, dozens of species ordering firebombs on hospitals, schools, refugee vessels. It wasn't propaganda, it was fact. And the truth hit harder than any weapon the Terrans had used. Riots began the next hour. In a quiet corner of the Hale Den system, a Council training academy was overrun by its own students. On the Grayless mining colonies, slaves broke their chains and burned the Council flag. Outlaw sectors declared neutrality, swearing off all galactic agreements until the Terran War was over. And most telling of all, several mid-tier species announced their resignation from the Council and offered the Terran fleet full access to their space. The Council was crumbling, from the inside out. They panicked. They rushed out a plan. Not diplomacy, not peace, an assassination. 3 Black Ops ships were deployed from the Galley Enclave, a hidden covert faction within the Council's shadow network. Untraceable ships with prototype cloaking tech, anti-Terran countermeasures, and one objective: eliminate Commander Redden. They reached the Resolute in 12 hours. They had been trained to breach hulls, bypass AI, deploy hunter-killer drones. They never made it inside. Terran sentry systems didn't detect intruders. They anticipated them. The moment the first Black Ops ship entered Terran range, the Resolute's defense grid activated. Not a single alarm was triggered. The infiltrators were dead before they touched metal. The last ship tried to escape. It was allowed to. Inside its data core, a final transmission was waiting, a video feed. Reddin, looking straight at the camera. "You sent assassins. I sent back the corpses." The message was received by the galley enclave 2 hours later. That building no longer exists. Inside his command chamber, Reddin sat with the next wave of target data hovering before him. Kren stood nearby. "Council communications have dropped by 60%. Nearly every species is retreating to their own territory." Reddin didn't respond. Kren continued. "We've intercepted a council-wide distress message. They're calling for peace talks, emergency summit. They're asking you to come." Reddin finally looked up. "They're desperate." "Yes. Then they'll try something stupid." Kren nodded. "Probably." Reddin stood slowly, turning to face the star map. "I'll attend." Kren's eyes widened. "Sir?" "Send word. Let them believe they've drawn me out." He turned to Kren, and there was a rare flicker of something sharp in his eyes, dark amusement. "And prepare Echelon Strike Unit 9. If they try anything—" He paused. "Turn the entire system into a graveyard." The invitation came through encrypted channels, wrapped in desperate politeness and dressed with the illusion of diplomacy. "High Commander Reddin of the Terran Fleet, the Galactic Council requests your presence at an emergency summit. Terms of ceasefire, reparations, and recognition are to be discussed. Safe passage guaranteed." Reddin read it twice. Then he tossed the data slate aside without a word. Safe passage. He almost laughed. That phrase, coming from the same bureaucratic machine that ordered Earth's extinction, was like a snake offering to share its warmth in winter. But he agreed to go, not because he believed in their peace, but because he knew their fear. And fear was leverage. Reddin wasn't just going to hear their apology. He was going to make them say it while choking on their own blood. The Council Summit was to be held on Virex Station, a neutral diplomatic hub suspended above the gas giant Yeller in Sector Delta Prime. Once praised as a shining beacon of interspecies unity, now it resembled a mausoleum. Patrol ships hovered like vultures. Defense cannons tracked every shuttle with trembling hands. Inside the central dome, glass ceilings showed the swirling clouds of Yeller above, glowing sickly green under the twin suns. Massive banners of the Council's crest still hung, faded now, like symbols from a forgotten religion. 23 species filled the half-circle auditorium. Not full attendance. Too many were already running, hiding, or burned off the map. At the center, a solitary chair waited. Empty. Until the door opened, and he walked in. No guards, no weapons, no entourage, just Reddin, dressed in matte black Terran command armor, unmarked, unflinching, eyes dead calm. He walked through the center aisle, slow, methodical, never looking away. Every ambassador watched him like he was a loaded gun, because he was. A living weapon they had tried to bury in Earth's soil, now walking through their house, alive, uninvited, untouchable. He sat, didn't lean back, didn't speak. He just waited until the first coward found his voice. Counselor Vel Herrick of the Thrax Confederacy cleared his throat, loud enough to draw attention, but not so loud he seemed confident. "Commander Reddin, we thank you for your presence." Reddin didn't blink. Herrick continued, "We, the remaining members of the Council, wish to open dialogue, to understand your intentions moving forward. The, severity of your actions has created a state of uncertainty. We believe it is in the galaxy's best interest to find a peaceful resolution." Reddin let the silence rot for a long moment. Then, calmly, "You want a resolution?" Another counselor jumped in. Representative Leora, soft-spoken, slitted pupils twitching. "We're prepared to offer full recognition of the Terran fleet's sovereignty and reparations within reason." Another spoke. "And a conditional apology." Redden's voice cut through the chamber like a cold knife. "There is no condition on an apology." All heads turned to him. "You don't bargain with the people you tried to erase. You don't negotiate with the descendants of the graves you filled. You kneel and you beg." Herrick looked offended. "Commander, with all due respect, there's no respect left," Redden interrupted. "Not after the Purge, not after what you did to our world." He stood, slowly, stepping forward. "I'm not here to make a deal. I'm here to see how many of you still lie to yourselves." Murmurs, nervous glances. "I watched Earth burn," he said. "I listened as your warships tore apart refugee transports. I heard your soldiers laughing while children screamed. You erased entire continents and called it mercy, and now you offer recognition." His voice hardened. "We don't need your recognition. We survived without it." Then, quietly, "We came back without it." The silence grew heavier. Leora spoke again, cautiously. "Then why are you here?" Redden stared straight at her. "To give you one final choice." He tapped the arm of his chair. A small device projected a 3D map into the air, highlighting 7 systems. Key council territories, central communication relays, military command posts, supply hubs. Then Redden pressed one more button. The systems blinked. Red. "Terran strike teams are in position across your territory, right now." Gasps. No one saw them come. No one will see them leave. Herrick stood up, furious. "This is blackmail. You violate the terms of—" "There are no terms," Redden said. He stepped forward again. "There's only debt and blood." On cue, across 7 systems, all hell broke loose. Terran stealth ships, embedded weeks earlier, activated. Orbital blackouts swept through planets. Mass driver bombardments shattered fleet command bunkers. Fuel depots exploded like dying stars. Within 13 minutes, the Council lost over 40% of its remaining logistical capacity. No warning, no mercy. Just silence after fire. Back on Vyrek Station, alarms began screaming. Live footage of the attacks streamed across the room. Counselors panicked. Some stood. Others shouted orders into comms. Security units began sealing doors. Everyone looked for safety, except Redden. He was still standing in the center, still calm, still watching, like a man watching dominoes fall. One counselor lunged toward the exit. A thunderous boom stopped him cold. The main doors locked shut. Metal slammed. And then, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Not Terran. Council security. They had activated Protocol Red Fall, a last-ditch contingency plan built in secret for such an event. It wasn't a diplomatic response. It was a trap. Dozens of armored guards stormed into the chamber. Weapons raised, targets locked. A synthetic voice boomed, "Commander Redden, you are under arrest by unanimous council decree. Stand down." Redden smiled, slowly. It wasn't the smile of a man defeated. It was the grin of a man waiting for someone to be this stupid. He raised one hand. "Echelon 9, he said. And then, the walls exploded. Terran soldiers burst in through the glass ceiling like shadows wrapped in armor. Obsidian suits, silent weapons, no insignias. Echelon Strike Unit 9, the most lethal unit ever produced by the surviving Terran war academies, trained in null-grav boarding, biological warfare, assassination, and sabotage. They didn't hesitate. They didn't speak. They butchered. Council guards were gunned down in seconds. Screams echoed through the chamber. Blood slicked the floor. Glass shattered. Council members ducked behind their seats. Some begged. Some tried to run. Redden didn't flinch. He walked through the chaos. His voice echoed above the gunfire. This is not a negotiation. This is the end of a regime. When the smoke cleared, over half the council members lay dead. The rest were taken. Not killed. Marked, stripped of rank. Their species denounced, their power erased. Each was given a simple message burned into the digital cores of their ships. This is your legacy. Carry it home. Tell your people the age of your empire is over. Tell them the Terrans don't want to rule you. They just want you to remember who bled. That night, Virex Station burned. It wasn't orbital bombardment. It was internal sabotage. Terran engineers planted grav-core destabilizers in the foundations. As Redden and his team evacuated, the station cracked from within. Fires tore through its oxygen lines. Support pillars collapsed. Hundreds still aboard screamed. No warning was given. No rescue ships came. And in the silent dark above the gas giant, the Council's heart was torn from its chest and cast into the void. Back aboard the Resolute, Redden stood in the central command deck as thousands of messages poured in. Some were threats, some were cries for mercy, some were complete silence, the kind that meant surrender without shame. Redden read none of them. He turned to Kren, standing nearby. "Status of the remaining Council worlds?" Kren replied. "Most have gone dark. A few are preparing to sue for peace. 1 or 2 still clinging to war." Redden nodded. "Let the ones who beg suffer longer. The ones who resist, wipe them off the map." Then he looked at the final sector on the board. One system left untouched. The core, homeworld of the Council's oldest species, where it had all begun. Redden pointed. "We end it there." They called it Elier Prime, the first light, the birthplace of the Council, and the heart of the galactic regime that orchestrated the extinction of Earth. It was an ancient world, wrapped in gold-plated space stations, cloaked in energy fields, circled by fleets that hadn't fired a shot in decades, not because they were peaceful, but because they believed no one would ever reach them. Until now. From high orbit, Elier Prime looked beautiful. Rich blue atmosphere, massive floating cities, towering silver spires that cut through the clouds, a world polished like a crown. But Redden wasn't looking at its surface. He was looking underneath. Deep beneath the surface of Elier's luxury and illusion was a vault system. Black sites, hidden AI archives, biological test labs, places where Earth's final days had been planned, not in strategy rooms, not on battlefields, but in silence, through whispered consensus, signed documents, and cold calculations. Every bomb that fell on Earth began in this place, and Redden was going to end the galaxy's innocence by turning it into a scar. On the command deck of the Resolute, the Terran fleet hovered in a diamond formation. Thousands of ships stood ready, silent, awaiting a signal that never needed to be spoken. There was no more surprise. Elior knew they were coming, and they were already screaming. Council remnants had retreated to the planet, their last bastion. Over 1 million elite soldiers from dozens of species now sat huddled across Elier's sky grid, along with 6 dreadnoughts still running the old defensive protocols. They believed they could repel a ground assault. What they didn't know, what they still didn't understand, was that the Terrans weren't here to fight on the ground. They were here to destroy the idea of safety. Redden stood before the assembled high command aboard the Resolute. Officers stood straight, weapons loaded, faces carved from steel and sorrow. "This is where it started," he said. "Not the war, not the betrayal, the lie." He looked around the room. This world wrote Earth's death sentence. Every document, every purge order, every erased Terran identity came from its halls. He stepped closer to the center console and zoomed in on the planetary core. "We're not going down there to plant flags. We're not conquering. We're not negotiating. This isn't a war anymore." His voice lowered. "This is a burial." The Terran fleet deployed Project Winterglass, a forbidden tech long theorized, never confirmed. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't a beam. It was a time-bending gravity sheath, fired from the Resolute's center spine that folded space around the planet's magnetic core and froze every satellite, station, and orbiting fleet in a stasis loop lasting exactly 92 seconds. Just enough time. Enough time for death to walk among them. From the void, sleek, dagger-shaped infiltration ships burst from Terran carriers and plunged toward Ellier's upper atmosphere. Inside each drop pod were strike teams outfitted with the deadliest tech humanity ever built in silence. Cloaked nanoblades, adaptive armor, neural-linked weapons that fired before the user pulled the trigger. They weren't Marines. They were gravediggers. And every one of them had a personal reason to make this planet scream. Redden didn't stay behind this time. He boarded the lead pod himself. Kren objected naturally. "You can coordinate from here. Let the units execute. You don't have to be in the blast zone." Redden looked at him, voice quiet but sharp. "The people who sent the purge orders lived in luxury while the sky burned. I'm not making that mistake." Kren nodded once. "Make it hurt," he said. "I plan to," Redden replied. The drop was brutal. Not because of enemy fire. The orbital freeze stopped any defense. But because the Terrans came in hard. No heat shielding, no mercy for the hull. They slammed through the atmosphere like meteor strikes. The first city hit was Cerelion's Crown, the Council's old cultural capital, where marble towers stood as monuments to unity, where libraries held centuries of speeches, treaties, and awards for peacekeeping. Terrans didn't read those books. They burned them. Strike teams moved street to street, silencing guards, seizing data cores, downloading secrets long hidden from public memory. One team breached the Council's propaganda archive and exposed 27 hollow documents outlining falsified events from the Earth Purge, entire fabricated war crimes used to justify extermination. They didn't release them. They just uploaded the raw footage, then turned the lights off. In the deep Undercity, Redden's personal squad breached Vault Hex 9, the chamber where the final solution had been conceived. Inside were 12 remaining elders, ancient figures from various species, too old to flee, too proud to hide. They looked up as the black-armored Terrans entered. One of them, a wiry being with glowing red eyes, stood and hissed, "You can kill us. It won't change what we've built. You're a disease. The Council will return." Redden walked slowly, helmet off. Scarred face hard and silent. He looked the elder in the eye. "I'm not here for revenge." He raised his sidearm and shot the elder in the head. "I'm here for closure." The others began begging. Didn't matter. Each was marked, not just for execution, but for legacy erasure. Terran soldiers implanted data-purging nanites into every system, virus strains that would eat through generations of archival records. No statues would be built for these tyrants. No books would mention their names. In the Terran way, to be forgotten was the cruelest end. Above the planet, the orbital freeze ended. Council dreadnoughts reawakened. Too late. The Terran fleet was already above them. Cannons locked, railguns charged. Fire fell. They didn't just disable ships, they shattered them. Shards of battleships rained down into the planet's oceans, turning waves to steam. One by one, the Council's last defenders were ripped from the sky. And Ellier Prime wept. In the final hours of the operation, Redden stood atop one of the ruins of the Great Council Citadel. Its dome cracked, walls blackened, wind howling through shattered windows. He stood alone. looking down at the heart of what was once considered the most sacred government in the galaxy. Now, a tomb. One of the surviving counselors was dragged before him. A member of the Relashi species, old ceremonial robes still clinging to their frail body. They looked up at Reddin with quiet defeat. "What now?" they asked. "Now," Reddin replied, staring at the horizon. "Now you go home, and tell your people what happens when you kill hope." Later, aboard the Resolute, the surviving Terran fleet gathered in orbit. They didn't cheer. They didn't sing. There was no celebration, just silence. And Reddin, standing before them, speaking through the fleet's unified comms. "Brothers, sisters, children of what they tried to erase, we didn't come here to plant flags. We didn't come to rebuild the Council in our image. We came here to finish what they started." A long pause. And then his voice dropped lower. "But we're not done." Eyes across 1,000 ships widened. "There are other systems that helped the purge and stayed quiet, profited from the ash of our worlds, sold out Terrans for trade routes." His voice sharpened like a blade. "We remember their names, too. The war should have ended with Elior Prime. It didn't, because behind every regime, behind every drone strike and orbital bombardment, behind every command to cleanse and every speech calling Terrans unstable, there were merchants, traders, bankers, fleet contractors, the ones who supplied the bombs, sold off Earth's abandoned colonies, and brokered silence in the aftermath. They never stood on battlefields. They never gave speeches. They hid behind trade networks and neutral zones. They got rich from the genocide. Now Reddin was coming for them, not to make them pay, to make them irrelevant. The first target was the Vernari Combine, a massive economic syndicate that had remained neutral during the Earth Purge, but whose trade ships were later discovered hauling Terran scrap off ruined colonies. They'd supplied fuel to the Council's fleets and sold salvaged Earth tech to black market buyers. For centuries, they'd claimed innocence. They were about to learn what judgment without trial looked like. In the shadow of Vernari Prime, a golden megastructure orbited a mining planet like a god's crown, a corporate station known as Havance. It was never meant for war. Its hangars were filled with cargo. Its hallways were glass and velvet. Its guards carried ceremonial stun rifles, not weapons of war. Executives slept in gravity beds and drank from crystal carafes while sending encrypted payments to every corner of the galaxy. They had heard of the Terran fleet. They just didn't believe it would touch them, until the stars disappeared. Thousands of Terran ships dropped from warp like a curtain of steel and fire, casting shadows over the Golden Station. The station's comms director nearly choked as he stared at the incoming scans. "That's not a fleet. That's a plague." Within minutes, power grids on Havance were hacked, turrets turned inward, luxury shuttles were locked in docking bays, and every exit was sealed by code. Then came the broadcast. Across every screen, hallway, and terminal in the station, Reddin's face appeared. He stood in full command armor, visor retracted, eyes sharp and calm. "To the executives and beneficiaries of the Vernari Combine," he began, voice cold and slow. "You are not soldiers. You are not statesmen. You're something worse. You watched Earth die, and you saw profit. You didn't send fleets. You sent invoices." The silence on the station was suffocating. "You gave the Council your fuel, your factories, your silence. And now you get your reward." He tapped a control on his wrist. All around the station, lights turned red. The AI voice that followed was synthetic and eerily polite. "Reactor destabilization in progress. Containment failure in 14 minutes. panic exploded across Havance. Executives screamed into comms. Ships tried to launch but failed. Security personnel tried to override the system, only to be locked out by code written in a dead language, Terran Old Code. Inside the Terran fleet, dozens of dropships deployed, not with soldiers, but with archive engineers. They weren't there to kill. They were there to erase. They infiltrated the Combine's data vaults, downloading transaction logs, communication archives, funding trails, and lists of names of individuals and corporations who fed the purge behind closed doors. Then, with zero warning, they deleted it all. Not just from local servers, from the entire Vernari trade net. Terran AI implants crawled through back doors, ripping financial records, erasing debts, severing interplanetary contracts, and melting black market holdings. Billions of credits, gone, investments, burned, digital reputations, scorched. Within an hour, the Combine was bankrupt, but Reddin wasn't done. The richest executive on the station, Voilin Chesk, locked himself in a private suite with armed guards, breathing heavy in silk robes while sweat poured down his face. "This is madness," he kept whispering. "We were neutral. We didn't pick a side." A voice responded from the shadows of the room. "No, you picked your wallet." Chesk turned to see a Terran operative standing calmly in the corner. Black armor, no insignia, one hand on his sidearm. Chesk raised both hands. "You can't kill me. I'm not a soldier. I've never even left this station." The operative stepped closer. "I know," he said. "That's the problem." A single shot echoed. Outside, from orbit, the Resolute's main cannon powered up. The golden station lit up like a sun before it tore apart from the inside. Reddin watched in silence as Havance ruptured, its explosion cascading through nearby trade satellites like falling dominoes. The screen turned white, then back to stars. Over the next 6 days, the Terran fleet moved with precision. They didn't attack random targets. They hit every non-governmental power that made credits during Earth's purge. Fuel guilds, salvage brokers, AI weapon manufacturers, shadow banks. Each time they came without warning. Executives were tried in seconds. No courts, no appeals, just death or deletion. By the end of the week, over 42 major trade families were either executed, erased, or left destitute. The galaxy's economy panicked. Markets collapsed. Trade sectors turned feral. And in the chaos, Terran operatives broadcast a simple message. This is not a conquest. This is your lesson. You do not profit from genocide and go unmarked. Meanwhile, in the outer reaches of the Vega Drift, a rogue broadcaster picked up a rare interview request. From Reddin, the man who hadn't spoken to the media in over a year. He appeared on screen in the shadows of his ship's war room. No lights, no glory, just the face of a man who had stopped caring whether he was liked. The anchor, a scared, neutral party named Elrin Voss, tried to remain composed. "Eliminating military targets? We expected that. But why target civilian trade guilds?" Reddin's reply was short. "They weren't civilians. They were accountants of death." "But they didn't fire weapons." "No," Reddin said. "They bought them for others." The anchor hesitated. "And the ones who didn't know?" "There's no such thing as innocent silence." Across neutral systems, something began to shift. Not fear, not resistance, but realization. For centuries, people had accepted that war crimes were things soldiers did, that governments ordered. But now, they saw that every transaction was a choice, that buying, selling, staying quiet was complicity. Some species began rewriting laws, some issued their own public apologies, others fled, a few tried to resist. They died before the sentence left their mouths. Inside the Resolute, Reddin stood before the final names on his list. It wasn't long now. Kren entered the chamber, holding a fresh report. 7 more sectors have cut trade ties with the old council powers. They're collapsing faster than we anticipated. Reddin nodded. Good. And the last group? Reddin looked at the screen. A cluster of private colonies, far in the fringe, where Earth refugees had once begged for asylum after the purge. These colonies had turned them away, sold their coordinates, handed them over to bounty hunters for reward money. They called themselves the Clean Sector. Now they were the next target. Reddin didn't even pause. Prepare the Black Wings. The Terran Black Wings were not a fleet. They were ghosts. Ex-council war criminals who had defected to the Terran cause in secret, given one final chance to earn redemption. Each pilot operated alone. One ship, one name, one mission, and when the Black Wings were deployed, no one survived. Within days, the Clean Sector went dark. All 6 of its colonies erased from maps. No transmission, no wreckage, just static where life once breathed. Reddin stood alone that night. He looked out over the stars, not with peace, not with pride, but with the weight of memory. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a piece of scorched metal, no bigger than his palm. The last fragment of his father's dog tags, burned on the surface of Europa when the Council's purgers had dropped fire on the evac zones. He had carried it every day. Now he dropped it into a metal case, sealed it, and turned back to the screen. There were no more names left on the list, but something still burned in his chest. Not anger, not vengeance, something colder. Finality. The stars were quiet now, not the silence of fear, or the eerie pause before another battle. This was real silence, the kind that came after a storm had flattened everything. No council, no fleets, no warnings across galactic channels, just stillness. And for the first time in his life, Reddin didn't know what to do with it. The Resolute drifted in neutral orbit above a dead system, once a bustling trade route, now a ghost corridor. No ships passed through anymore. Not after the Blackwings turned its main station into dust and warnings. Reddin sat alone in his chamber, staring at the names on the final report. The list. Every name, every species, every colony, every traitor, every profiteer, every signature that had been on the Purge Accords, even if they'd claimed ignorance, every single one, gone. He had done it. The Purge was paid for, in full. So why did he still feel like something was unfinished? He tapped the console, and the screen flicked through old images. Earth, before the war. Green oceans, burnt orange deserts, city lights blinking across the night. Faces of people long buried in slag. His mother's smile, his father's calloused hand on his shoulder. The sound of rain on a tin rooftop when they were hiding underground, waiting for the bombs to stop. The memories hit harder than any missile. And they still weren't enough. Because memories didn't rebuild. They haunted. A soft knock broke the silence. Kren entered, holding a fresh tablet of intelligence reports. He looked older than he did just a few months ago. Gray was creeping into his beard. The war had aged him. Had aged them all. "Status report," he said quietly. Reddin didn't turn. Kren cleared his throat. "No new resistance. No more hostile factions. Communications in the southern fringe sectors have resumed. Trade routes are reforming. Neutral colonies are reaching out for contact." "Reaching out to us?" Reddin asked, still not turning. Kren hesitated. "Yes, and not just out of fear this time." That made Reddin glance back. They're asking what comes next. What does come next? He'd never let himself think that far. His whole life had been revenge. Structured, simple, They hurt us. We find them. We bury them. But now the work was done. And the Terran fleet, forged in pain, shaped by rage, and sharpened by loss, was left without a target. What happens to a sword when there's nothing left to kill? Later, Reddin gathered his high command. Captains, strategists, veterans, survivors. No medals, no ranks needed. Just people who'd lost everything and built something new from the ash. He stood at the front of the room, arms behind his back. "The war's over," he said. They didn't cheer. They just listened. "I know many of you expected to die out here. I did too. I thought once we burned through every traitor, every coward, every profiteer, the silence would be our grave." He paused. "But we're still here." He looked up at the star map above them, the galaxy they had bled to change. "I don't believe in peace," he said. "Not the kind they used to preach. Not that false harmony they used to sell while they bombed our homes. But I do believe in control." He stepped forward. "The galaxy is watching us, not with fear anymore, with expectation. We proved we wouldn't be erased. Now they want to see if we become the monsters they always claimed we were." He met their eyes. "I won't give them that." And so the Terran fleet transformed. The war machine didn't dismantle itself. It shifted into the Accord of Ash, not a government, not an empire, but a vow, a pact between the broken, the silenced, the exiled. They wouldn't rule the galaxy. They'd watch it, from the shadows, ensuring no purge could ever rise again. Terran ships became sentinels. They patrolled old council corridors, protected colonies who'd stayed neutral, helped rebuild outposts destroyed by the war. They didn't ask for praise. They asked for records, names, truth. They became the keepers of memory and the wardens of consequence. But not everyone was content with that. Some younger Terrans, born in exile, raised among warships and blood, struggled to accept a galaxy they didn't fit into. They'd grown up on fire and fury, and now they were being told to be still. Some left the fleet. Some vanished into outlaw sectors. Some whispered that Reddin had gone soft. He heard every whisper, and one night, standing alone in the cryo chamber, he stared at the sealed pods. Thousands of Terrans, still frozen, still waiting. Scholars, farmers, healers, historians, people who hadn't seen war, people who might help rebuild, if they ever woke. Kren joined him quietly, placing a hand on one of the pods. "She was a teacher," he said, "before it all started. Taught languages. Said the universe would need translators once humanity expanded." Reddin nodded. Kren looked at him. "It's time." Reddin didn't answer right away. But then, with a slow breath, "Start waking them." The first to emerge from the ice didn't recognize what they were waking up to. No Earth, no council. A galaxy both fearful and reverent. They cried. They asked about home, about children, about cities that no longer existed. Some couldn't handle it. Some screamed. Some went back into stasis. But others, they began again. One colony, then 5, then 20. Built from broken stations, asteroid belts, scorched worlds no one else wanted. Terran soil remade. Not for war, for life. And still Reddin remained aboard the Resolute. He rarely left the ship, didn't attend ceremonies, didn't name cities after himself. He was a relic of the fire, and relics don't fit in with gardens. But he watched. He watched as children were born under stars that once carried only screams. He watched as Terrans learned to sing again. He watched as the galaxy, slowly, cautiously, accepted the truth. Humanity hadn't come back to conquer. They had come back to end the lie. One evening, decades after the purge was avenged, a young man visited the Resolute, a diplomat from one of the rebuilt Terran colonies. He was polite, clean uniform, clear eyes, carried no weapon. He asked to see Reddin. They granted it. He found the old commander standing on the bridge, alone, staring into the stars. "Sir," he said, "I was told I should thank you. My parents were born in Cryo. I was raised in a colony you protected. I'm here because of what you did." Reddin didn't answer. The young man waited. Then quietly, he said, "I'm not here just to say thanks. I'm here to ask what we're supposed to be now. The war's over. The scars are healing. But we still carry your name, Terran. What do we do with it?" Reddin turned to him slowly. His voice, hoarse with age and silence, finally spoke. "You carry it." The young man blinked. "That's it? You carry it. Until it means something good again." Reddin turned back to the viewport. Until when they hear Terran, they don't flinch. And that night, for the first time in his life, Reddin slept without a weapon next to his bed. They say the Terran fleet never truly disbanded, that the Resolute still floats in the edge systems, that if a world begins to whisper about cleansing, or a trader starts selling genocide behind curtains, or a government thinks of raising the old flags again, they get a transmission. Just one line. No signature. No threat. Just a reminder. Humanity remembers, and that's enough. Because silence still sweeps the stars. But now, it trembles for different reasons, because the ghosts of Earth never rest, and the galaxy knows, never again.